I arrived at Stanford's campus 2 hours early, not out of excitement, but to confirm something my gut had been whispering for weeks, that this wasn't just a graduation, it was a silent farewell to me. The air buzzed with celebration. Parents clutched bouquets, siblings took photos, students in crimson gowns laughed and posed near fountains. But I stood alone, watching it all like someone outside a storefront window looking in. I scanned the printed program for my name, any mention at all. Nothing. The row family listing under the reserved seating read, Marcus, Helena, Lucas, plus guests. I wasn't a guest. I was their daughter. But in that moment, I realized they no longer saw me as family. A volunteer handed me a badge labeled simply, Visitor, white background, Times New Roman font, no crest, no row, no Elin. When I spotted them near the front, my stomach tightened. My mother, Helena, wore a sleek ivory suit and her signature pearl earrings. She looked serene, like a queen watching her favorite son ascend. My father, Marcus, leaned on a silver-topped cane, a picture of stern pride. And in the middle stood Lucas, my younger brother, glowing in his honors cords, shaking hands with the dean. Not one of them turned to look for me. Not even Lucas. I walked toward them. Slowly. Cautiously. Like approaching a stranger's funeral. My mother caught my eye and gave me a quick smile. The kind you reserve for neighbors. Not blood. Oh, she said plainly. You came. Her voice was smooth, emotionless. I forced a nod. I saw the event posted online. Her smile didn't falter. I didn't think you'd make the list. It was a very selective gathering. No. Welcome. No. I'm glad you're here. Just curated exclusion wrapped in civility. I sat in the back, not even close enough to hear Lucas's name called clearly. A toddler kicked my chair. A man beside me snored through the valedictorian's speech. When my father stood to give closing remarks as part of the alumni board, I expected at least a mention. Maybe a polite thank you to both children. Instead, his voice echoed across the auditorium. Today, we celebrate not only the brilliance of our son, Lucas, but a new chapter in our family's legacy. One built on focus, unity, and integrity. Then the line that burned into my chest. As of today, we formally distance ourselves from individuals who no longer reflect those values, including our eldest child. A pause. Then silence. Not a gasp. Just the subtle shift of people pretending not to hear what they clearly did. I didn't stand. I didn't cry. I just stared at the gold Stanford seal on the stage, realizing I had just been disowned publicly, cleanly, and without ceremony. Not in a courtroom. Not in private. But under chandeliers and applause, I was no longer Elin Rowe to them. Just a visitor. A guest. A ghost in a family photo I was never meant to be part of again. After the ceremony, I wandered the reception area like a misplaced shadow. Round tables were draped in white linen, lined with place cards bearing proud surnames and neatly folded napkins. I scanned the crowd until I found the one labeled Rowe Family. There it was. Lucas, Mom, Dad, a couple of relatives I vaguely recognized, and even Lucas's high school tennis coach. But not me. I stared at the cards again, certain I had missed something. Some folded corner or typo. Nothing. It wasn't an oversight. It was intentional. A girl I hadn't seen since college passed by and paused. Ellen? Wow, I didn't think you were coming. Your mom said it was a tight, family-only thing. She gave a polite, awkward smile like she'd just stepped on something fragile and wasn't sure whether to apologize or walk away. I managed a nod, then turned away quickly before my expression gave too much away. A catering staff member brushed past me carrying a tray of mini cheesecakes. Excuse me, she said gently. You must be with the vendors? You're not wearing a family pin. I looked down at my badge. White. Plain. Visitor. No crest, no name, no past. Just a placeholder for a stranger. That moment hit me like a slow realization rather than a blow. Not even a name tag, just a ghost badge. I smiled stiffly and stepped back into the crowd, pretending I belonged there. I knew I didn't. I wasn't part of the celebration. I was tolerated, the way a forgotten receipt stays in a pocket until laundry day. Later that night, back in my apartment in Oakland, I peeled off the blazer I had ironed so carefully and let it drop to the floor. I tossed my heels aside and sat cross-legged in front of my bookshelf, reaching for an old yearbook from Lucas's high school graduation. I remembered being there. I remembered the awkward photo in front of our house Mom had insisted we wear matching colors. I'd worn a green dress with a wrinkle down the side that earned me a 20-minute lecture before we left. But as I flipped to the tribute page at the back, I stopped cold. There it was, a photo of my parents and Lucas standing on the porch, beaming. The same pose, same moment. Minus me. I'd been cropped out, seamlessly erased. The composition was perfect, the gap where I'd stood now filled with shrubbery and shadows. I reached up and touched the page, almost expecting it to shudder beneath my fingers. My eyes blurred. They hadn't forgotten me, they had deleted me. It wasn't just the yearbook. I started noticing a pattern I'd ignored for too long. The family holiday cards only featured Lucas, usually in some glossy, well-staged pose. A newsletter my parents sent to family friends last year mentioned their one incredible child and thanked him for representing the values we hold dear. I remember reading it and telling myself they meant it metaphorically. Now, I knew better. I checked my inbox and found a chain of family emails going back months, group messages I was never copied on, photos of vacations I didn't know they took, property updates, and trust revisions that conveniently excluded me. It was as if they'd been rehearsing my erasure, one update at a time. I opened a drawer in my desk and pulled out old birthday cards. One of them read, "To our children, may you both keep making us proud." That was from 5 years ago. 2 years later, the tone changed. "To Lucas, the light of our lives." And then last year, nothing at all. Not even a text. I hadn't forgotten these things. I had just explained them away, excused them, convinced myself I was being too sensitive, too emotional, too needy. I was just being erased slowly enough that I wouldn't notice until it was too late. I recalled the family photo from a beach trip to Oregon, our last vacation together. We'd laughed by the bonfire, roasted marshmallows, and even played a silly charades game Mom had insisted on. I checked Lucas's Instagram. There it was. A perfectly edited photo from that night. My parents, Lucas, even our golden retriever. But again, no Ellen. My spot had been cropped out or blurred into the darkness. I remember sitting next to Lucas that night, laughing at something dumb he said. But if you looked at the photo now, it was like I'd never been there at all. One memory kept resurfacing, the time I got accepted into Columbia and sat my parents down to share the news. My father looked at me, nodded once, and asked if I'd considered taking a gap year to help Mom with the foundation's logistics. I didn't fight back. I said yes. I deferred my dream for them, for the family. And when Lucas got into Stanford, they threw him a full banquet at a vineyard. My sacrifice was a line in the family ledger, and his success was the headline. Back then, I didn't even realize what that meant. But now, the pattern had become blindingly obvious. It was never just about one moment. It was 1,000 small acts. Like the time they used Lucas's face in every fundraising campaign, but never asked me to be in the photo. The way they sent me newsletters addressed to friend of the foundation instead of daughter. The year they forgot my birthday, and when I mentioned it, my mother said, "Oh, I thought you didn't care about those things anymore." They never forgot. They just stopped including me. And the cruelest part wasn't the exclusion itself, it was the way they made me question whether it was even happening. Gaslighting wrapped in politeness. "You're too sensitive. You always read too much into things. Why can't you just let it go?" But I remembered everything. Every missed invitation. Every holiday dinner where I was asked to take the group photo instead of be in it. Every backhanded compliment disguised as concern. That night I didn't cry. I got quiet. I reached under my bed and pulled out a shoebox where I kept things I wasn't sure I was allowed to care about anymore. Inside were old letters, a childhood sketchbook, a pair of earrings my grandmother gave me before she passed, items with no market value but immeasurable emotional weight. I added one more thing to the box, A folded ivory card from Lucas's reception table. On the front it said, "To our one and only." Inside, "You made us proud, son. Love always, Mom and Dad." That card had been laid out on a silver charger plate at the head of the row table. I had taken it when no one was looking. It was then I realized something fundamental had changed. Not snapped. Not broken. Just shifted. Like a bone finally settling into place after years of quiet fracture. I whispered aloud in the stillness. "You didn't forget me. You chose to remove me." And for the first time, that sentence didn't destroy me. It freed me. Because if I wasn't part of their memory, I was free to start building my own. One where I didn't have to shrink to fit into a frame I was never truly welcome in. And so I sat there, barefoot in my apartment with shadows curling around the walls, holding a piece of cardstock proof that they had said it aloud. Our one and only. I wasn't in the photo. I wasn't on the card. But I still existed. They couldn't crop me out of myself. And they had no idea that in trying to delete me, they had written the first line of my own story. One they'd never be able to edit again. The storm didn't start with thunder. It began with the soft patter of rain on my kitchen window around midnight, barely audible over the hum of my old refrigerator. I sat cross-legged on the floor, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, my laptop casting a blue glow across the room. I wasn't working, not really. I was just looking, digging, clicking, following hunches that didn't make sense until they did. It had started with a simple thought. If they could erase me from the table, what else had they erased me from? The question burrowed into me like a splinter, and no amount of distraction could push it out. I still had access to an old shared drive left over from when I worked part-time as a volunteer accountant for the Rowe Family Foundation in college. They'd never revoked my email access. Maybe they forgot. Or maybe they didn't think I mattered enough to lock the doors behind me. Typical. They always erased me in conversation, never in systems. My name was no longer on the Christmas card, but I could still log into the portal that tracked donation tax receipts. I was scrolling aimlessly through PDFs and spreadsheets when I found it. A folder labeled Holdings. Updated. Inside, a file called Transfer Authorization, Vermont. PDF. My stomach flipped. That was the summer house Grammy Elise's property in Vermont, the cedar-shingled one with the wind chimes on the porch and the rocking chairs that creaked even when no one was sitting in them. She left it to the Rowe grandchildren in her will, and I remember vividly her looking me in the eye at age 17 and saying, "It's yours as much as his, Ellen. That house holds your summer stories, too." I clicked the PDF. The first thing I saw was my name, Ellen Grace Rowe, in a bold serif font above a signature. My signature. Or so it seemed. But something felt off. The S in Grace was flatter than mine. The loop on the L was too tight. It looked imitated. My pulse started to pound as I leaned closer. There was a notary stamp in the bottom right corner. Notarized by Eva Chambers. My cousin. My mother's favorite niece. The one who always played the neutral card at Thanksgiving while quietly relaying family updates back to Helena. I reached into a drawer and grabbed an old lease agreement, something I had signed years ago. I opened it beside the transfer form. Placed them side by side. And my breath caught. They weren't the same. Not even close. The forged version looked like someone trying to draw my signature from memory close enough to fool the inattentive, but not close enough to pass a forensic check. This wasn't an error. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was fraud. I stared at the screen, heart thumping against my ribs, the rain outside getting heavier. I remembered that house, how I'd helped repaint the porch railing sophomore summer, how I once spent a full week organizing Grammy's bookshelves while she baked strawberry pies. It wasn't just a property, it was ours. And now it had been stripped from me with a stolen signature and a cousin's complicit ink. I slammed the laptop shut and stood slowly, the room suddenly feeling too small, the air too thick. I picked up my phone and called the only person in the family who had ever looked at me without pretense. Aunt Margot. Grammy Elise's sister. Her voice cracked with sleep when she answered. "Ellen? Honey? Is everything all right?" I tried to say yes, but it came out broken. "I found a transfer document," I whispered. "My name's on it. but it's not my signature. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was recognition. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly. "I thought they'd tell you eventually. Your mama said it was just for taxes, that they'd let you know." I felt my knees give out, and I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor again. "You knew?" I choked. "You knew they took me off the deed?" She was crying now, barely holding it together. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to be part of it, but I didn't know how to stop it either. That sentence broke something in me, because it meant it wasn't just my parents. It meant others saw it happen and said nothing. They let me vanish. Let my name get removed like a typo in a family spreadsheet. And worse, they rationalized it. "It's just paperwork. You weren't using it. It's for the good of the family." It always came down to that. The family. The image. The brand. I didn't sleep that night. I opened every folder, every file, every message thread I could still access. I highlighted everything, cross-referenced metadata, verified timestamps. It all led to one inevitable truth. My parents had orchestrated my removal. Not just emotionally, but financially, legally, systematically. The next morning, still in the same clothes, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by printed documents, post-it notes, and a half-drunk cup of stale coffee. I circled signatures. I drafted timelines. I took screenshots of bank transactions connected to the Roe Foundation's property sales, one of which funneled directly into a boutique investment firm founded by none other than Lucas. That was the moment my anger stopped being vague and started being focused. This wasn't just about being excluded from family dinners. This was about theft. This was about identity. This was about watching your name be used as a placeholder just long enough for someone else to take what was meant to be yours. I called a lawyer. Her name was Naomi, recommended by a friend in nonprofit litigation. She didn't say much on the phone, just listened, asked a few questions, and requested I send over what I had. "You're not overreacting," she said quietly when I told her the story. "You're just one of the few who caught it." As I clicked send on the email containing all my evidence, I felt a strange mix of nausea and clarity. I wasn't doing this to destroy my family. I was doing this to stop being destroyed by them. Because if I didn't speak now, they'd keep using my silence as permission. They'd keep forging signatures, rewriting narratives, and polishing their image while I sat in the shadows wondering if I was ever really part of it to begin with. I didn't want revenge, but I wanted the record to show I existed. And that I saw. And that I wasn't going to disappear quietly. Because they may have taken my signature, but they didn't take my story. And now, I was finally ready to write it on my own terms. I didn't scream when I found the forged signature. I didn't march to their doorstep or make an angry phone call. That's not how they raised me. They taught me that silence was safer, that appearances were everything. So instead, I did the one thing they never expected me to do. I investigated. Quietly. Methodically. Unshakably. The morning after I uncovered the fraudulent property transfer, I pulled my hair back into a tight bun, brewed the strongest coffee I could, and cleared off my kitchen table. That small island between the stove and the window became my war room. I laid out every document I could find. Trust agreements, deed transfers, family newsletters, financial ledgers, foundation reports. I opened a fresh legal pad and drew timelines, created columns, matched dates. The betrayal burned, but I didn't let it blind me. I let it sharpen me. I started with the house. Grammy Elise's beloved summer home in Vermont, where I'd learned to ride a bike on gravel, where I'd roasted marshmallows with Lucas under starlit skies. She left it to both of us, equal heirs. I remembered the will clearly. She'd read it aloud to us, her voice tremoring but proud. But now, it was gone. Not transferred, not gifted, sold. Quietly, without press release or family notice. The buyer, a shell company named Lark and Vine Properties LLC. On the surface, generic. But with a little digging, I traced it back to an office building in San Jose shared by a boutique investment firm co-founded by Lucas and funded by my parents. I clicked through LinkedIn, scanned old press kits, cross-checked donor logs. My stomach twisted as I followed the paper trail. The family had sold Grammy's house to themselves through a maze of corporations and silence, and used my name as a ghost signature to get it done. It wasn't just about property. The erasure was institutional. I found board meeting minutes for the Roe Foundation where my name, once listed as Assistant Director of Development, had quietly disappeared from the rosters. There were memos about streamlining the family narrative for public outreach, drafts of branding statements that highlighted the legacy of Lucas Roe, with no mention of a sibling. One file was particularly hard to read. Roe Family History. External copy. I opened the PDF and scanned the text. Founded by Marcus and Helena Roe, whose only child, Lucas, exemplifies their mission. My hands shook. I read it twice to be sure. Only child. I stopped mid-search to breathe. The rain had returned, tapping against the window like it, too, wanted in on the secrets. I reached for an old shoebox beneath my bed, a collection of scraps I'd held onto for years. Handwritten notes from Grammy, a ticket stub from a mother-daughter brunch we once shared. A photo of me and Lucas building a snow fort in Vermont. It was my quiet proof that I'd been part of this family once. That I'd mattered. Then I looked at my phone and called the notary listed on the fraudulent deed transfer, Eva Chambers, my cousin. The one who always smiled too much at reunions and stayed out of family politics. She didn't answer the first time. Or the second. On the third call, I left a message. Eva, I need to know why your name is on a document transferring Grammy's house without my consent. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's legal fraud. And I suggest you call me back before I file something formal. I ended the call with my heart pounding. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted accountability. An hour later, my phone rang. Eva's voice was tight, nervous. Ellen, I didn't think you'd ever see that file. I sat up straighter. Why did you do it? She hesitated. Your mom said it was just to finalize tax details. She told me you were going to sign later, and she didn't want to bother you while you were working in Oakland. I felt something inside me clench. So you forged it on her word? Eva sighed. I didn't forge it. She sent me a scan. I just notarized it. My jaw tightened. That's not how notarization works, Eva. You're supposed to witness the signature, not pretend. Silence. I'm sorry, she whispered. I was told it was urgent. I didn't want to cause problems. I stared out the window. You didn't cause problems. You caused consequences. For yourself, for them, for me. After that call, I knew what I had to do. I pulled up my email and contacted Naomi, the lawyer I'd reached out to before. I sent her everything. Documents, timelines, Eva's voicemail, screenshots of text messages between Mom and Lucas referencing the Vermont deal. Naomi didn't ask questions. She just replied, "We'll build the case from here." She attached a checklist of what she'd need next, a formal statement, copies of the original will, any documentation of past ownership, and, if possible, audio recordings. That last one made me pause. Because I had them. I hadn't meant to gather evidence for a court case. I'd started recording things years ago for self-preservation family meetings, awkward brunches, planning calls for the foundation. At the time, it felt paranoid. But now, it felt prophetic. I found a folder labeled Roe Misc Audio and began sifting through them. One recording hit me like a punch to the gut. A donor prep meeting from 2 years ago. My mother's voice clear and controlled. We only use Lucas in branding. Ellen's too unpredictable for our image. Then my father, chuckling. She used to read everything. We have to be careful. I sat in stunned silence. The people who had raised me like I was porcelain had spoken about me like I was a liability. I clipped that audio and sent it to Naomi. Later that night, I drafted my formal statement. It wasn't angry. It wasn't vengeful. It was factual. I wrote about the property, the signatures, the exclusion from documents, the shifting of roles, the rebranding of the family legacy as a one-man show. I wrote about how the people who had told me to always be seen and not heard were now trying to act like I had never existed at all. I ended the document with a single line. I do not wish to ruin them. I wish only to reclaim the truth. As I attached it to my email and hit send, I felt a calm settle over me that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't waiting for them to explain anymore. I wasn't hoping for an apology. I was done with the silent acceptance of being written out. They thought I'd fade away quietly. Instead, I was building a case so loud it didn't need my voice to echo. It had facts, dates, and receipts. The next day, Naomi called me. "We're filing a petition to challenge the property transfer and initiate a trust audit. I'm going to request a quiet hearing to avoid public fallout for now." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Thank you." She paused. "You're not just reclaiming a house, Ellen. You're reclaiming your place." Her words stuck with me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the audio file playing in my earbuds. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I took notes. I underlined phrases. I documented intent. Every paper cut they'd dealt me over the years, every passive-aggressive note, every silent omission had finally come together in one undeniable picture. They didn't just forget me. They deleted me. Strategically. Legally. Permanently. Or so they thought. But now, I was the one with the evidence. And I wasn't building a case out of bitterness. I was building it out of truth. Quiet, steady, undeniable truth. The kind that doesn't need a voice to scream, it only needs a courtroom and a judge who reads every word. Because while they rehearsed their speeches for fundraisers and galas, I had been writing my affidavit in silence. And this time I wouldn't be the one erased. My mother always said appearances were everything. "Don't let them see the cracks," she'd whisper before every holiday dinner or charity gala, as if perfection could be performed into reality. But when I walked into the Caldwell Foundation building unannounced that morning, I wasn't interested in appearances. I wasn't there to yell, to throw papers, or demand a scene. I was there to deliver a velvet envelope and to look her in the eye, not as her daughter, but as the woman she had underestimated for far too long. The front desk intern, a girl barely out of college, dressed in tasteful neutrals, froze slightly when I stepped through the doors. Her eyes darted to the security button under her desk. I recognized that look. It was the same one I used to wear when I still worked here. The face you put on when someone not quite welcome arrives. I gave her a calm smile and said, "I'm here to see Helena Caldwell." Her throat bobbed nervously, but she pressed the call button and said, "Miss Rowe is here to see you." She didn't even ask for my name. When the doors opened and I stepped into Helena's office, she didn't flinch. She looked up from her screen, her fingers still resting lightly on the keyboard. She wore a navy sheath dress and the same gold crest pin she always wore to press events. "Caldwell family. Est. 1982. I hadn't seen her in person since Lucas's graduation. Not really. Not without a stage between us. "Ellen," she said, voice smooth like pressed linen. "I would have preferred we schedule this." I stood across from her desk, clutching the envelope, and replied, "You preferred a lot of things, didn't you?" Her lips twitched. Not quite a smile. Not quite a wince. She gestured to the leather chair across from her, but I didn't sit. I placed the burgundy envelope on her desk and slid it forward. "This contains a notarized affidavit, a property transfer challenge, and supporting evidence of fraud," I said. "There's also a USB drive with audio files. You'll recognize your own voice." She didn't touch the envelope. "Ellen," she began, folding her hands, "we regret that you felt excluded, but we had to do what was best for the family's image." There it was, the apology that wasn't. I tilted my head. "You don't regret what you did. You regret that I found out." She sighed, eyes flickering to the frosted window. "You've always been dramatic." "No," I said quietly. "I've just always noticed what you wanted me to ignore." She stood slowly, smoothing her skirt. "We're not trying to hurt you. But families evolve. We can't have every branch growing in its own direction. It dilutes the message." I blinked at her. "This isn't a brand, it's blood." Or was. She took a slow step forward, like a queen preparing a diplomatic statement. "You're still welcome, at events, as a guest." That word again. Guest. I remembered the white badge from the graduation, the missing name cards, the photoshopped images. I smiled. tight-lipped. You want me silent. You want me small. You want me to clap from the back row while you pretend I'm not clapping at all. Her expression didn't change. You're making this harder than it needs to be. You're confusing polite erasure with kindness, I said. But don't worry, I'm not asking for a seat at your table. I brought my own. I left before she could reply. I didn't wait for her to open the envelope. She would. And when she did, she would see the documents, the timestamp transfers, the handwriting analysis, and the audio clear as day of her saying, I didn't photograph well for their narrative. Of my father laughing, saying, we need to be careful what Sen finds. She used to read everything. Yes, I did. And this time, I read the fine print. That evening, I attended a charity gala I had RSVP'd to 6 months ago, back when I still thought I had a place in this version of our family. I wore a simple black dress, nothing flashy, just dignified. My name tag, clipped to my lapel, read, E. Rowe, independent consultant. Not Caldwell, not family. I wasn't seated at the main table, I wasn't on the program, but I was there. And when my father took the microphone to toast our one and only daughter Lucas, whose vision guides us all, I didn't flinch. A few heads turned to look at me, then quickly turned away. Even Lucas blinked, looked uncertain, but said nothing. His champagne flute clinked with the donors beside him. I didn't raise mine. I simply sat, hands folded, a stillness inside me that felt both ancient and freshly forged. They weren't going to change. Not for me. Not for anyone. They had built a legacy around erasure and called it evolution. When dessert came, I quietly slipped out. No one stopped me. No one even noticed. I walked 2 blocks in heels that pinched slightly, the night air cool against my collarbone. In the back of the rideshare I called, I looked at my reflection in the window. I didn't look angry. I looked awake. And when I got home, I didn't sleep. I opened my laptop and continued what I had started gathering. Not just for legal proof, but for truth. I went through every PDF, every spreadsheet, every archived email they thought I'd forgotten. I pulled metadata, timestamps, and matched every transaction. Their empire wasn't made of marble. It was made of paper. A week later, my lawyer Naomi filed the petition in probate court. We requested a hearing to contest the property sale and to audit the family trust. She advised me it might take months. I told her I'd waited years. At first, there was no reaction from the family. Silence, as always, their preferred weapon. But the silence cracked when the nonprofit watchdog blog picked up the trail. The headline wasn't subtle. Legacy erased? Inside the quiet disinheritance at the Caldwell Foundation. The article didn't name me. But it didn't have to. It quoted internal emails I had leaked, referenced board decisions, and included a line from one donor. It's strange how the family used to have 2 daughters. The fallout was swift. Donors withdrew. Events were postponed. Emails leaked. The audio clip made its way online, just one. The one where my mother said, Ellen doesn't fit the image we're selling. The internet, in its brutal honesty, did the rest. They dissected it. Reposted it. Commented. This is what generational narcissism looks like. You don't cut out your kid for marketing. You don't get to call it a legacy if you built it by erasing people. My inbox flooded. Some messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Others from strangers who had felt just as erased. You're brave, some said. I didn't feel brave. I just felt done. And yet, amid all that noise, the only message I couldn't stop rereading was the one from a PR firm hired by the foundation. It read, in pristine Helvetica, We're preparing a unified family statement and would love to include a quote from you. Your voice matters. No subject line, no greeting, no apology. Just a thinly veiled attempt to rope me back in as a prop for damage control. I didn't respond, because I wasn't their problem anymore. I was their consequence. They called me ungrateful. I called a lawyer. And now, the narrative was no longer theirs to control. The morning the story broke, I didn't even have time to pour a cup of coffee before my phone started buzzing like a beehive on fire. 4 missed calls. 2 voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize. 1 text from Naomi, my attorney. Check the front page. You've been heard. Still half asleep, I opened my laptop and typed in the URL of the nonprofit watchdog site Naomi had mentioned during our last call. It had been 3 weeks since she filed the petition to contest the fraudulent property transfer and freeze the Caldwell Trust. We'd been waiting, quietly, for a response. A counter-motion. A denial. A threat. But we didn't expect this. There it was plastered across the homepage in bold serif type. Legacy of silence. Anonymous sources raise integrity concerns at the Caldwell Foundation. Number 46. Anonymous sources raise integrity concerns at the Caldwell Foundation. The subheadline read like a wound I hadn't known I still had. Allegations of forged documents, donor manipulation, and erasure of a family member emerge in exclusive investigation. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands trembled. I hadn't even submitted my full evidence package to the press. Not yet. But someone had spoken. Someone had shared just enough. Copies of the board minutes that had quietly removed me from leadership roles. Quotes from emails that referred to me as an unnecessary complication. And worst of all, a leaked audio clip I had submitted to Naomi the clip. I clicked on the embedded media player. My mother's voice filled the room, smooth, rehearsed, and ruthless. We only use Lucas's image in our campaigns. Elin doesn't photograph well with our narrative. Then came my father's chuckle. We need to be careful what she finds. She used to read everything. I had to sit down. Not because I was shocked they had said those things, but because now, everyone else knew they said them too. And for once, it wasn't my voice against theirs. It wasn't me crying in the bathroom while they toasted Lucas with champagne. It was their own words, echoing across the internet. The article didn't name me, but it didn't have to. Every quote, every document, every omission pointed to one thing. A daughter they tried to erase and a truth that refused to stay buried. I scrolled through the comments. Nepotism at its finest. This is what happens when you turn your kid into a PR liability. You can't trademark family values while throwing away your own child. And beneath it all, one comment that stopped me cold. She didn't want revenge. She wanted to be acknowledged. Yes, that was it. Not revenge. Not retribution. Just recognition. By lunch, 2 major corporate sponsors had issued quiet statements distancing themselves from the Caldwell Foundation. 3 donor events were postponed indefinitely. A local Boston paper picked up the story. Then a national one. By evening, there were hashtags trending. Number erased daughter. Caldwell legacy. Number truth eyes louder. My inbox was flooded with messages, some from journalists, others from people like me. One woman wrote, I was written out of my family's business after my brother took over. I never said anything because I thought no one would care. Thank you for making it matter. Another email, from a nonprofit coordinator I'd met at a conference years ago, simply said, I knew something was off. You always carried yourself like someone trying to hold together what others kept breaking. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just kept reading. That afternoon, a black car pulled up outside the Caldwell Foundation building. A photographer captured Helena stepping out, sunglasses hiding her expression, lips tight. The foundation issued a 2-sentence statement. The Caldwell Foundation remains committed to transparency and integrity. We are currently reviewing internal procedures and policies. Translation. We're panicking behind closed doors and hoping this blows over. But it wasn't blowing over. I received a call from an old board member who had always been courteous but never curious. She asked me in a careful tone, Do you want to talk privately? I think I owe you a conversation. I thanked her and declined. I wasn't here for side doors or backroom apologies. I had spent too many years knocking on doors they refused to open. I wasn't knocking anymore. I was building a new house entirely. That night, I took a walk to clear my head. I passed a newsstand where my mother's face, composed but exposed, was featured on a cover story. The headline, The Price of a Perfect Family. I stopped and stared. She wasn't smiling. The lapel pin she always wore, the gold Caldwell family crest, was missing. I smiled without meaning to. That pin had once represented everything I thought I wanted: belonging, recognition, pride. But now, I knew it was a shield for people who only protected each other in silence. When I got back to my apartment, a letter was waiting in my mailbox. No return address. Handwritten. I knew the slanted, sharp handwriting instantly. It was Lucas. Inside was a single sentence. You were right. I'm sorry it took this for me to see it. No excuses. No rationalizations. Just 10 words. It didn't fix everything, but it mattered. I placed the letter in the same box where I had kept my old family photos, my birthday cards, my proof of existence. I sat with it for a moment, then added the gold crest pin I had kept from the last gala before they erased me. I didn't need it anymore, but I wasn't throwing it away. I was reclaiming it, on my own terms. Later that night, a PR firm emailed me again. The subject line read, "Rebuilding Together." The message said, "We are preparing a family unity campaign. Would you be open to issuing a joint statement with your parents to support the healing process?" It ended with, "Your voice matters." Oh, I didn't respond. They hadn't cared about my voice when they cropped me out of the foundation, when they sold the family home behind my back, when they toasted our one and only child in a ballroom while I sat 2 tables away. They only cared now that the public did. No, I wouldn't help them patch the image they shattered. The next morning, I called Naomi and told her to proceed with the full evidence submission. Not just the house in Vermont, not just the fraudulent signature, everything. The branding documents, the trust allocations, the exclusionary memos, the manipulated board votes, the audio recordings, all of it. She asked, "Are you sure? This could bury the foundation." I answered without pause. They buried me first. And then, for the first time in over a decade, I took a deep breath and let it out without it catching in my chest. Because the media had done what my family never would. It had seen me, heard me, believed me. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was undeniable. They wanted me silent. But now, the silence belonged to them. After the media storm died down and the hearings were complete, I stood barefoot in the center of a quiet room that didn't even exist the last time my parents called me by name. The floor was polished pine, warm with morning light filtering through windows we'd rescued from a condemned municipal library. There were no chandeliers, no velvet ropes, no carefully curated backdrops, just mismatched folding chairs, watercolor paintings on the wall, and the quiet buzz of laughter and possibility. It wasn't a boardroom or a trust-controlled property. It was mine. More importantly, it was theirs, the young women who now filled this space with art, poetry, and purpose. Girls like I had once been. Invisible, softened into silence, erased by people who should have loved them. This was no longer the house they sold behind my back. It was the Row Arts and Literacy Center, funded by the money they tried to steal and renamed for someone they tried to forget. It started quietly, not with a press release or a groundbreaking ceremony, but with a wire transfer from the newly reclaimed trust. I didn't tell anyone except Naomi. I didn't want it to be about revenge. I wanted it to be about reclamation. For once, I didn't have to knock on locked doors. I had keys, and I didn't need my family's approval to make something meaningful. I used the settlement money to buy the building, restore it, and turn it into a haven for foster teens and displaced young people with stories no one wanted to hear, just like mine. There was no press coverage. No media fanfare. I didn't want headlines. I wanted healing. The first 2 residents moved in a month after the space opened. One had been kicked out after coming out to her conservative aunt. The other was a high school senior who'd never had a quiet place to write. They didn't know the story behind the building, not the full story. They just knew it was safe, warm, and that someone believed in them. That was enough. I spent my mornings helping with workshops, creative writing, collage, storytelling, and my evenings reviewing applications, organizing donations, and making tea in the tiny kitchen in the back. I had traded corporate luncheons for hand-labeled envelopes and peeling paint, and I had never felt richer. The only thing I insisted on making formal was the plaque mounted just inside the entrance. A simple piece of engraved brass, polished and quiet. It read, "In memory of Elise Rowe. For the granddaughters they erased and the ones who refused to stay erased. Every time I passed it, I ran my fingers across the grooves of her name. Not with sadness, but with gratitude. Grammy Elise had believed in me. She had made me a co-heir in her will. That belief had been papered over, rewritten, notarized away by those who thought her legacy could be edited like a family Christmas card. But they forgot something essential. Grammy didn't raise me to stay quiet. She raised me to finish what she started. The Bar Harbor house, the one in Vermont, had been returned to me legally. I could have sold it. Could have burned it to the ground. Could have turned it into a symbol of loss. Instead, I turned it into a writer's retreat for women from foster care backgrounds, just like the ones I now supported in my center. The first 2 residents moved in last month. One is working on a memoir. The other just wants to learn how to bake without setting off the smoke alarm. That's enough. I remember standing in that old house the first night I got it back, the creak of the wooden floor beneath my feet, the ghost of laughter in the hallway. I walked out onto the back porch, touched the newly painted railings I once helped sand as a teenager, and whispered aloud, "You didn't win." And I wasn't talking to my parents. I was talking to the voice inside me that had once believed I wasn't worth fighting for. That voice had been evicted. 1 page at a time. My parents never reached out. Not once. No phone call. No email. Not even a carefully worded statement about family unity. Once the dust settled, their foundation remained suspended under investigation. Their board slowly dissolved. Their reputation, once pristine and polished, now lived in Google search results that would never go away. Astria Caldwell, family matriarch and visionary, was now better known as the woman who erased her own daughter for branding. Marcus Caldwell, her silent husband, remembered less for his investments and more for the audio clip where he chuckled, "She used to read everything." Yes, I did. And now the world had read it too. Lucas surprised me. He never made a public statement. But one Tuesday afternoon, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Just my name, written in his sharp, familiar handwriting. Inside was a single line. "You were right. I'm sorry it took this to see it." I sat with that letter for a long time. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some things are better left unanswered, not out of bitterness, but because the apology, when it finally comes, belongs in a quiet place. I folded the letter and placed it in a small wooden box beside the gold crest pin I'd once worn to galas. Neither held the weight they used to, but I kept them anyway, not as symbols of what I'd lost, but of what I'd survived. One afternoon, as I was sweeping the floor of the reading room, a boy maybe 8 or 9, gap-toothed and curious, came up to me and held out a crumpled paper badge he'd made with glitter glue and construction paper. "This is for you," he said solemnly. "Because you showed up." I took the badge, blinking back tears. "You made this?" He nodded. "It's for important people. The ones who make rooms feel safe." I smiled, pinned it to my shirt, right over the spot where the family crest used to sit. "Thank you," I said. "I think this might be the best one I've ever had." We sat in the back row of a poetry reading later that day. A 4-year-old girl read a piece she'd written about belonging to herself. I didn't speak. I didn't need to be seen. I was just there, in the room, finally at peace. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't about pretending it didn't hurt. It's not about setting the other person free. It's about releasing yourself from the weight of waiting for something that may never come. I used to think healing meant fixing what was broken. Now I understand it means letting go of what broke you so you can build something that doesn't carry that break forward. And I did. They tried to erase me. I built a future they'll never be part of. And never be able to take away. 6 months after the court ruling, I walked into the renovated community center on a crisp fall morning with a tray of warm pastries and a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The building buzzed with soft laughter and the scent of cinnamon. Teenagers flipped through sketchbooks and debated over lyrics in the corner writing lounge. In the art room, someone had painted a mural of a girl stepping out of a broken frame and into a blooming field. It was imperfect. Raw. Bold. It was everything I wanted this place to be. I looked around and smiled, not because I had proven anything to my parents, but because I no longer needed to. I wasn't waiting for an invitation, an apology, or acknowledgement. I had stopped asking for a seat at their table and realized I could build a better one where no one had to shrink to fit, one where no one got cropped out of the picture. Forgiveness had become something different to me. Not a gift to them, but a quiet release for myself. I didn't need Helena to say she was wrong. I didn't need Marcus to call. I didn't even need Lucas's letter, though I had saved it anyway, along with the old family crest pin, in a box under my bed, not as keepsakes, but as bookmarks in a chapter I had finally finished. They would always be part of my story, but they no longer got to write it. That afternoon, while prepping materials for a poetry workshop, a girl I'd never met before approached me holding a folded paper badge in both hands. "I made this for you," she said shyly. I knelt to her level and unfolded it. In glittery marker, it read, "Important person." My chest tightened. "Because you always listen to everyone here," she added. I blinked back tears and pinned it to my sweater, right over the heart, right where the Caldwell crest used to sit. We sat in the back of the workshop room as students read aloud their pieces, stories about loss, love, survival. And as they spoke, I realized I wasn't there to be noticed. I was there to belong. On my terms. In my voice. With my name. Some wounds never get stitched. They just stop bleeding when you stop picking them. And the silence around me no longer ached. It made room. Room for others. Room for myself. Room for new beginnings. I didn't crave their table anymore. I had my own. And every seat at it was earned, not inherited. If you've ever had to walk away from the people who made you feel small, if you've ever had to build your own table just to be heard, then know this. You are not alone. And you are never invisible. Not anymore.